Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Neutral News Network. I'm Brian alongside Jake and Zach. And today we are going to be covering something that's been pretty prevalent in the news as of late. Uh, it is the Alien Enemies Act. And we're going to do a deep dive into the history of it, how it's been used by various presidents, and kind of why it's in the public light right now and why everyone's talking about it. Again, we're going to be trying to do this as neutral as possible. For context, this act has been used by multiple presidents on both sides of the political spectrum throughout history. So, giving this a viewpoint from the lens of the current administration using it, I feel is fair, seeing as how Roosevelt used it in World War II, and Wilson used it in World War One. And then obviously there were different parties back then, but the law was passed by John Adams in the the late 18th century, late 1700s. So, but before we get into that, we're going to go ahead and crack into some of the ground news articles that follow the U.S. economy. So, if you want to go ahead and scroll down for me just a little bit, Zachary. Yep. All right. So, in the news, we've got Trump officially announces 25% tariffs on all cars not made in the United States. I haven't done a huge deep dive into this information as of right now, but I believe this only counts for cars that are not finished in the United States. So basically, like they can be partially assembled in other countries and then finished in the United States, and they will not be exposed to that 25% tariff. But I believe, if the car is finished in, let's say, Mexico and then imported to the United States, then it would have to face that tariff. Additionally, there were hearings today in regards to national intelligence and the dangers that the country is facing for the year to come. That happened in the Senate yesterday, and the congressional hearing was on that today. Obviously, there's a huge story going on with a potential leak involving an Atlantic journalist and the Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. That was discussed at large during this hearing, but the primary focus is that, as the article says, China poses the biggest military and cyber threat to the United States, um, surpassing Russia. So, very interesting and something to keep track of as the weeks and months go on. And then lastly, there was an internet subsidy program that has been in place for quite a few years, and it seems like the court, which is leaning conservative, is looking to uphold that and not looking to overturn that, regardless of the overturn in political party. So, with that, yeah. If you want to go ahead and give people a overview, Zachary, that video that I sent, if you want to pop that up and we can play that, and then we'll crack into um, the National Archives website.
President Trump invoked the Alien Enemies Act today. Now, a
Oh,
federal
we need
judge is
some audio on
considering
that
a
video.
wide-reaching order to
Or can
block
I not
him
hear
from
it?
deporting non-citizens under that act.
The president took action, saying the U.S. is being invaded by the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua. Earlier, a federal judge had granted a temporary restraining order barring the president from deporting 5 Venezuelans under the Alien Enemies Act. It's only been used 3 other times. One was part of the internment of Japanese American civilians during World War II. The Alien Enemies Act could allow the president to speed up deportations.
Watch breaking news on YouTube.
All right. So, go ahead and as we go ahead and crack into the National Archives website here. So this is obviously from the government. This goes over the Alien and Seditions Act of 1798, as you can see here. Yeah, so just going into some context with this, and Jake, feel free to interject if you've got any
Yeah,
questions or anything you want to
go
bring
ahead.
up. But yeah, so as you can read here, this was an act that was basically passed prior to the United States gearing up for a war with France. Obviously, early in our nation's history, it was a wild time. Obviously, we had just declared independence in 1776, with France as an ally, helping us, win the war against Great Britain at the time. And obviously, things were still contentious between us, Great Britain, France, that entire coalition in the decades after us declaring our independence. So basically, prior to this war potentially breaking out, the United States government wanted to find a way to try and shore up its basically internal protections from dissidents, from outside actors, things of that nature. And it was really one of the first instances of, I won't say like a constitutional crisis, but it really put to the test the essence of free speech. There was a interesting provision in this Alien and Sedition Act that actually prevented people from speaking badly about the government, which I actually didn't know that. But you can see in the second paragraph down there, at the very bottom, it says, "quote, print, utter, publish any false, scandalous, and malicious writing about the government." Which, obviously that could be subject to opinion. If somebody writes an opinion piece and somebody thinks that that's false, even though it's an opinion, they could be potentially prosecuted for that. And
Doesn't
honestly, oh, go
doesn't
ahead.
that infringe on free speech?
Exactly, especially because this order and act is coming directly from the government, which I feel
Mhm,
like a lot of people don't understand how free speech works in the United States, because it is a constitutionally protected
mhm.
activity from the government, from the government.
Right,
So
yeah.
if
It
we
protects
have
your right as an individual
from the
to
government,
from the government infringing on your First Amendment
yes.
rights.
Right. But let's say, YouTube, let's just say it for this example here, YouTube has a policy where I can't call somebody stupid. And I look at Jake and I say, Jake, you're stupid. YouTube has every right to take me off of their platform because I broke their terms of service. So they're
Correct.
not violating my free speech because they're not the government. And now, if the government were to go to Neutral News Network and say you can't say this about us, we're taking you off of offline, then that would be a issue with the First Amendment.
Right.
So, but yeah, so you can see here, in the third paragraph below that, it was mostly directed at Democrats and Republicans. The Federalists were the individuals who were in charge of the government at the time. They wanted a big centralized government. Obviously, you know, the Federalists ended up actually losing the 1800 election because of this act. It was so unpopular, mostly because you know there was just huge waves of immigration that were still going on in the United States. Obviously, with us being a young nation at the time, and there were individuals from Great Britain who were moving here, and they hadn't become naturalized citizens yet. I mean, you can see right there, it takes 5 years to it became, or it was 5 years to become a
It takes
naturalized citizen, and
14
then
now.
it went up to 14. Yeah,
Hmm.
so they raised those requirements, which then made it so all of these people who had just come to the United States like had no chance of becoming a citizen anytime soon.
So,
Eh,
Brian, does it still
Yeah.
take that long? I feel like I know this answer, but I'm asking you, does it still take that long to become a naturalized citizen?
Um. So obviously, I just looked it up on Google real quick, and it says um, 18 to 24 months for the naturalization process. But I
Okay.
don't think that that fully takes into account. Um, oh yeah, so there you go. The most common path to U.S. citizenship through naturalization is being a lawful permanent resident for at least 5 years, and
Mhm.
that is from USCIS, which is citizen. Let me see. Let me get that acronym right. U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. So that
Mm.
is um, what they say. So it looks like it did eventually go back to 5 years. And I do want to
Okay.
point out that a lot of these acts, because I believe there were four or five acts that were passed, all of them expired except for the one that we are talking about today, and that is this Alien and Seditions Act. The rest of them all, were signed into law by John Adams, and then they eventually expired. Well, this one never had a time limit, so it never expired, and nobody ever repealed it. So it just kind of sat there, for about 100 years before we get into World War I, which is kind of the time where it was really used. Um, to its full I wouldn't say to its full potential, but definitely kind of broke the mold and definitely
Who
started
is it
to
who is it used
Woodrow.
against, I guess?
Oh, so
Like
so it was used
the
against.
demographic.
Yeah, so it was the Central Powers countries. So you had
Okay.
Austro-Hungary, you had Germany, you
Mhm.
had I think it was mostly Austro-Hungary, Germany, and
Not
I'm
Italy?
trying to think. Not no, because Italy was in the was
Allied.
allied nation for
Yeah.
World War
At
One.
one.
Um,
Yeah, that's right.
but I think the Ottoman Empire and Bulgaria. I
Okay.
think those are the main ones. And initially, this act here that you're looking at on your screen, this only encompassed males of the age of 14 and higher. So not women, but just I guess you could say fighting age men is all that the act originally covered. Um, and again, this was never really used all that much, but obviously there were some uh, journalists that were prosecuted, and I'm sure there were a few people who were detained and deported in the 1790s at the onset of this act. But this wasn't like a huge I guess dive into the potential of what the act could do. If you scroll down, just for people who are reading this page here, there is a transcript that goes and actually shows you all of the language that the act has. So you can read the act in its entirety. Uh, and right now, just kind of laying the groundwork for what's kind of going on today. There's a legal battle that is going on between the courts and the current administration, based upon them enacting this act in, I believe, on March 15th. There was a flight of individuals who were apprehended and detained, and then eventually put on a plane. And that plane took off and went to an El Salvadorian prison where they were dropped off. And those individuals who were on those, I believe it was two flights, are there to this day, as far as my knowledge goes. Now, um, there was a court order, um, basically suspending the Alien Enemies Act that had been enacted by a federal court judge, I believe in D.C. Um, and that's drawn some scrutiny from the current administration, basically saying, they have the authority to do that, and the judge is going off of the language here, and all previous instances of this act had used the term invasion literally. Like, let's just say the United States was being invaded by France, in I'm throwing out just a random date here. Let's say France invaded the United States in 1832, right? Like that would constitute you being able to enact the Alien Enemies Act because you were
Mhm.
actively being invaded by a enemy country.
Mm.
Now, the current administration has used the terms invasion at the southern border very frequently. And I think that that's what they were trying to do in order to try and justify this use case for the Alien Enemies Act. But the Alien Enemies Act is a wartime provision. So I mean, I believe that's how it is being judged by the courts, is that this act can only be enacted during wartime.
And
And
that's where the like whole disagreement on basically the meaning of the word invasion
mhm,
is coming
right.
from.
Yeah, because like the thing is that like an invasion doesn't have to be ongoing, but I think it's the potential to be invaded. Think of it, because really the two other times that this act was brought forth was in World War I and World War II.
So
Um,
so
okay.
by this logic,
Mhm.
could you say that ISIS was invading the US and then got rid of
So it's it's been a tricky subject, and this is just in my opinion.
Mhm. I'm just
Again, if
asking
anybody's
a question that I was thinking of,
oh,
something
thanks
that was
for
interesting to me.
I also just saw a comment from Ashton Miller. Thanks for covering this topic. I would be impressed if the 25% car tariff stays long. It'll be a huge impact on a lot of North America. Absolutely. Just as a side note, the car industry for Mexico, Canada, and the United States is absolutely huge, and they all rely on each other, the automotive success that North America has. So I couldn't agree more that I think that this is going to be another point of contention uh, with the trade war that's been going on. But I think that I have heard rumors that they were going to exclude certain car parts. So we'll see if that actually comes to fruition. Um, but anyways, you were saying, Jake,
Mhm.
about ISIS. I think so. What what's really strange currently going on, and this kind of also plays on what has been happening recently in the news in regards to the military chat that was leaked to the Atlantic Reporter. Um, we are in a active, I would say, counterinsurgency operation against the Houthis. We've done such operations with ISIS, the Taliban, things of that nature. Um, but we haven't had many formal
Yeah.
declarations of war as of late.
Right, that's what I'm
Now,
saying.
yeah,
But does it
so
matter?
I see now, me, I would think it does,
I would think
because
so too.
if you're basing it upon previous precedents, with it being, the potential for, now the thing is that this initial scenario was the potential of war with France, but then you had the instance of it only being enacted with World War I and us and our involvement with World War I, and then World War II with our involvement there as well. So and those are the main two times that it has been utilized was World War I and II. So those really the only two previous examples that we have. But if we're trying to
But those are
stay
wars.
consistent,
Those are
correct.
clearly
Those are yes,
wartime.
those are clearly wartime with it, and they had congressional like there was congressional approval to declare the war.
Now, could something else I just thought of. The one, correct me if I'm wrong, but that one executive order that made the cartel the terrorist
Terrorist
organization,
organization. Yeah.
does that count for this the Venezuelan gang or whatever? Could that
This,
can be
s-
considered an enemy of the United States?
so and I think that this is where the current administration is probably trying to take this
Okay.
justification for it. Yeah,
Mm,
it makes sense the way that they're trying to justify it by
mm-hmm,
by calling it an invasion, by also labeling, these cartels as, terrorist organizations, and
mm-hmm.
the war on terror, quote, has never ended since 9/11. So,
Right.
it's just kind of one of those they're trying to project it as a wartime
War.
instance in order to justify the end, like the means that they're going to, right?
So they could just say it's the war on terror continued, basically.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think
I'm
it
not
would.
saying this is. I'm saying
Yeah,
this is. I'm trying to get into the headspace.
right. No, it
Mhm,
absolutely, and that's the thing too is I'm trying to just I'm putting myself in their shoes to try and
mhm.
try and explain how they're trying to justify it, and because obviously I would assume they knew that they were going to get challenged in court, right?
Oh yeah, they went
But
at yeah.
yeah, so I'm thinking of it from a perspective of how would I, as a government who wants to enact this act, um, start laying the framework in order to make it a justifiable action? And I think that's how they're doing it. Kind of
Mhm.
like what you're saying is like,
Right.
they've designated them as a cartel. They've designated them as the cartels as terrorists. They've said that
Mhm.
there's a invasion going on at the southern border by now this group that's, labeled as terrorists. But the problem is, and I think that we'll get into this when we start really diving into this act and the problems that I have with it in general, just me personally. Uh, but the problems that I have with it is that it really allows the government to take away your due process. And that's the case. It was the case in World War One. It was the case in World War II. It's the case if it's used today. The government can designate you as an enemy alien, and
Yeah,
your
but
due
that's not
process
the
is gone.
but that's not the argument. The argument is, are
Right,
we in wartime?
right, and
In my opinion,
and
that's kind of
that's
what I'm
Mhm.
viewing the big argument's going to be. It's not going to be whether we're taking away due process. It's
And
going to
so
be
let's
how
see.
whether or not we're in wartime.
how do you deal with the way the current administration is handling it, where I'm pretty sure there's at least one federal court that has put a
Mhm,
pause on, the ability to use this act, I assume, while they figure out if they actually can or not. Uh,
mhm,
but the current administration just kind of doing it anyway. Do they have the right to do that within, the bounds of the act? Or
mhm.
is this just kind of a they're doing what they want kind of thing?
Could they make the art? Yeah, like, to go off what you're saying, could they make the argument that could they make the argument that they're speaking bad about the president for not enacting this in what he feels is wartime?
Well, yeah, that's a whole nother can of worms, honestly. Um,
Hmm.
but I have, and I'm not going to use this person's name because they didn't give me permission to, but I did talk to this person about this. Um, he said that the courts have every right to do what they're doing in order to stop the administration from doing these deportations. So basically, the courts have gone through a normal process. Somebody sued in order to do it. The judge ruled in the favor of the person suing in order to stop this. Um, and that's perfectly allowed. That's how our judicial system works. And
I
then you
was gonna
can
say
take it
that
to an
sounds like
appeals
our
court.
checks and balances. Checks and
Right.
balances.
Now, when it comes to can the government just do what it wants? Um, when I was talking to the individual, he said it's tricky because technically no, but um, I think we've all agreed, at least the three of us here, that we've become, as a country, very, very politicized over the last 2 decades. Um, and a lot of our judicial systems, a lot of our executive systems, everything is kind of politicized now.
Mhm.
And right now, the Department of Justice is viewed by many people as politicized, with, I believe, Pam Bondi specifically saying that it is her job to do the acts and the orders of the president. I believe that's a rough quote, but I'm pretty sure she said something similar to that. If
See if I
anybody
can
wants
find
to
it.
look that up, you
Yeah,
can.
see if I can
Yeah.
find it.
Um, so this individual informed me that they can find them, kind of think of contempt of court. So the federal judge can find the government criminally contempt by not following its orders. However, criminal contempt is usually enforced by the Department of Justice. So you can see where the line lies there. If it's a politicized Department of Justice, then the federal courts can find the government in criminal contempt, but then it dies at the Department of Justice because it's not going to be pursued. So, does that answer your question, Zachary?
Yep.
Cool. All right. Any luck, Jake?
I'm getting there.
Okay. Let's see here. For anybody watching, feel free, if you have any questions, post them in the chat. Make sure to like, and again,
Uh,
subscribe,
I
share
have
to
this
friends, anything
quote.
like that. Okay.
Bondi told the president that she would not let him down. I will make you proud and I will make this country proud, she said. I will restore integrity to the Justice Department. I will fight violent crime throughout this country and throughout this world and make America safe again. That's what she said to President Trump when she got sworn in.
Okay. Let's see.
Trump praised Bondi's record as a prosecutor and said she will end the weaponization of the federal law enforcement.
Gotcha. Well then, maybe maybe I misheard and misrepresented that quote. If that is the case, I apologize. I thought I did hear that from somewhere. So if we can't
I
find
don't
it, then
I
I
don't
will.
see exactly that quote anywhere, but uh, that's about all I could find. Maybe I can't. Maybe I'm not looking in the right spot, but
Okay.
that's all I'm
Um,
finding.
let's see. Yeah, only thing I can find here is on individuals kind of talking about how Bondi is operating from the Republican side of things. All right, so we'll move on for now. I wish I could find that quote because I could have swore I could have swore I heard her say it. That's why I was making that statement. But again, I could have been mistaken. So if that's the case, I apologize. Um, but anywho, so let's go ahead and crack open to the NPR article. So this kind of goes into the same lines that we've already talked about here, but I think this article allows us to kind of break down, you know, why this is a troubled act in the first place, especially because of the history that it's had. Um, so, but this is kind of going into what Jake is talking about or talked about here. So if we go right there where you're at, Zachary, that second paragraph, Trump's directive targets members of Tren de Agua, a Venezuelan prison gang that has grown into a multinational crime organization over the last decade and was designated a terrorist organization by the U.S. State Department in February. So, designated a terrorist organization. Now, and here's something I did look up. Um, According to the wonderful world of the internet, we did not officially declare war on Iraq. We passed a authorization for military words authorization for use of military force against Iraq resolution of 2002, um, which was a law that was passed by the House 296 to 133 in October of 2002 and passed by the Senate October 11th, 2002, 77 to 23, and was signed into law by George Bush on October 16th. So that was the last time that we officially authorized military force against Iraq. But we haven't had a official war declaration since 1942, which I would assume was shortly after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, which would make sense. Um, but so you can see that we haven't officially declared against like terrorist organizations in this sense. Um, but yeah, so you can see the paragraph below that, which this is also the language that's used um, with the Alien Enemies Act. The proclamation authorizes expedited removal of all Venezuelan citizens ages 14 and older deemed members of the group and who are not U.S. citizens or lawful permanent residences. So the problem with this is that there was no due process to prove that these individuals were
Or
not
part of that
citizens.
gang.
Yeah, or that were part of that gang. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Right. And I mean it's the same thing that we'll get into when it comes to one and World War II, but all of the all the Japanese who were interred during World War II, they weren't, they were just people. They were just citizens of the United States or just, non-citizens but still residents of the United States, and they were just thrown into internment camps for the
And
majority, if not the whole entire duration of the war.
correct me if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but that's not specifying gender either.
Correct. Now, that's because the act, I believe, and I believe it's in this article, I believe the act in 1918 during one was expanded to include women as well.
Oh, okay.
So,
Okay.
yes. Yep.
I got you.
Um, yep. Yeah. So, and a little bit farther down, the very last paragraph that's on the screen that you have there, Zachary, the Alien Enemies Act is a wartime law. Yep. One below that. So yeah, and the three times it has been used until now were all during major wars. Um, so yeah, kind of goes into more how people were skeptical of it. But you can see right there was immediately blocked by a federal judge who ordered the deportation flights to turn around, and the administration continued with the flight. They did not turn the flight around and continued to deport approximately 250 people to El Salvador. Which again is was a huge snafu because technically that plane should have turned around based upon the legal order from the judge, but it did not. And Tom Homan, who is responsible for this, has stated that the planes will keep flying, or something to that effect. Let me find the quote because I've already accidentally misquoted someone once. So let me Tom. Oh, there seems to be an OBS thing that popped up.
It's
Zachary.
don't worry about it. It's okay.
Okay, got it.
The viewers can't see it. Haha. Take that.
Okay.
Oh, okay. It looks like it's blocking me out.
All right. So let's see. So this was 3 days ago. So this is a fairly recent development. Tom Homan, president of Donald Trump's, Tom Homan, President Donald Trump's border czar, vowed Sunday that the Trump administration would not defy court stemming from legal challenges over its invocation of the Wartime Alien Enemies Act to deport undocumented migrants from the United States. He claimed, quote, that plane removed 240 terrorists from the United States, unquote. Um, uh, and he basically said like he's not going to get into specifics because it's going to be litigated with the judge. He also said when saying that the Trump administration would not defy the court, he said, quote, I don't care what the judges think as far as this case, unquote. He proceeded to call the judge crooked and called for the judge's impeachment, which both him and Donald Trump have called for the judge's impeachment. And Chief Justice John Roberts of the Supreme Court has actually come out and said that that is not the way to properly go about disagreements with judicial rulings. So uh, that is kind of the majority of that. And here I have actually I have this from ABC News, and I'm actually going to share the article to Zachary real quick, and then I'm going to see here. Here's the article, Zachary. And then there's a bunch of text from there. Basically, that's going back and forth from the individual interviewing him and his responses. So. All right. So we'll go ahead and go back. People still call it the war in Iraq.
War in Iraq, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. But yet it was technically never officially declared a war by Congress, even though it's it's all the language that we use. But yeah, I'm trying to.
Wow.
Yeah. Um. I'm trying to see.
I guess while Brian's looking for that, that's a good it's a good pivot into saying that just because you hear something doesn't mean it's truly what's going on.
Right. Yeah. You hear that it's the war in Iraq, but it's not technically.
It's not
Technically,
technically
it's not.
deemed a war. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So let's get back into the NPR article here. We'll kind of keep scrolling down here.
And that's why you come to Neutral News Network.
Right. I mean, we all do have our biases, each and every one of us. I don't care how neutral you are, but we're doing our best to try and give you just an overall general scope of what's currently going on, how this has been utilized in the past, how it's being justified to be utilized today, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And we want you to go out there and if you might not agree with what we're saying, and that's fine. Just go out there and look for yourself. See what you can find. Challenge us too.
Mm-hmm. So, so if we scroll down a little bit more, there's a black and white photo that says, when has the act been used before? That's in the article, that NPR article, Zachary. So.
That's what I have.
And then, okay, perfect. I just know that I've got a delay going on with the stream. Sorry. But yeah, so basically it goes into discussing when this act was used. So you can see during the War of 1812, British nationals living in the U.S. were required to report information including their age, length of time in the country, place of residence, and so on and so forth. And then you obviously have World War One with Woodrow Wilson invoking it basically upon all the Central Powers. And you can see here that we put approximately 6,000 people at the time in internment camps, and most of them were Germans, which makes sense. But you can see below that we registered almost 500,000 Germans as enemy aliens and arrested 6,300 in about a year and a half's time. Which, I mean, that's a lot of people. I mean, when you really think about it. I mean, my small town that I live in is approximately 1,900 people, so that's about three of my small town. And you know, I think the city of Milwaukee is around 600,000 people total. So you figure an entire large metropolitan city uh, was required to register with the government as an enemy alien, and this is in the 1918. Like this is during World War One. I mean, they didn't exactly have cell phones back then or technology to easily do this, and they still managed to do it. You know what I mean? So this was a big operation back then. And then most recently, and I would say honestly more famously, because I feel like a lot of people don't realize that the Alien Enemies Act was enacted during World War One. Everyone kind of talks about how it was utilized during World War Two to deter the Japanese, and is kind of one of the darkest things that shrouds over Roosevelt's presidency.
Mm.
He's known for a lot of things, the New Deal program, kind of pulling the United States out of the Great Depression. Additionally, getting us through World War Two before he passed away right before the war ended. But I mean, this is a permanent stain on his legacy, on the fact that there were many, many thousands of innocent Japanese who were forced to live in camps for years just because they were Japanese. And I mean, and I'm almost positive that, um, you know, these were U.S. citizens.
Yeah.
Like these were U.S. citizens who were detained just because they came from a certain country. That's nuts to me. Absolutely nuts. And
Yeah, it
that's why,
is.
I think this act, that's why I'm saying, like, I think this act is deeply flawed, and I think that we should avoid using it because of
I mean,
this, because it's a
not
very
only that,
slippery slope.
it's just it's extremely outdated too.
Right. It's outdated, and the fact that there's even a portion of it here. There's if you scroll down just a little bit more, Zachary, there's a black and white picture of a person pointing to a sign. So yeah, uh, let's see. By the end of World War II, at the very top paragraph at the screen, by the end of World War II, over 31,000 suspected enemy aliens and their families, including Jewish refugees from Nazi Germany, had been interred at camps in the United States. So we were,
That's crazy.
we
I didn't
we
know
had.
that.
Right. But like, think of what's going on today, right? We've got refugees from all different portions of the world, right? Who have come to the United States in years past to either escape the brutality at their current country or to find a better life. To, and these people, the majority of them provide the local economies. They work, they do jobs that you wouldn't necessarily do yourself, things of that nature, and they're here legally. I want to make that very clear. These people are here legally as refugees, and this act gives the government the right to just apprehend them and deport them, and or to just detain them in a camp. It's quite barbaric, and I think that it's very outdated. And again, just I want to try and stay as apolitical as possible with this, because it was just the same way. It was just as problematic when Franklin Delano Roosevelt used it during World War II, and it is just as problematic using it today. And yes, for those who didn't know, FDR was a very, very, very liberal Democrat for the time. So, um, yes, but yeah, so and at this point too, so you can see that 100,000 Japanese Americans were placed in internment camps. So this is a huge step up from the 6,000 that were detained during World War One. I mean, huge increase. Um, so this act has had a storied history and is something that should be taken seriously, because uh, again, it is a very, very risky and steep infringement on individuals' rights in this country, especially because remember, those Japanese
It
Americans
can be.
were citizens. But well, that's the thing, is of course it can be, but
I'm
that's the
not.
thing.
I'm not saying I don't I'm not saying I disagree with you. I'm just saying like
Correct.
in different views of it, it can be an
Yes.
infringement. I'm not saying it's gonna be. I'm not saying it's not gonna be.
Right. Because well, right, we can't predict the future. We
Right.
can't predict the
Yeah.
future.
Mhm.
I'm just saying it's concerning to
It
me
is
that
concerning.
it's
Yeah.
even
Mhm.
an option, right? That it's
Right.
out there, you know.
Yeah.
Um, I believe two Democrats wanted to try and appeal it during Biden's presidency, and they failed to do so. Not a huge
Hmm.
shock, because they didn't have enough votes. But yeah, just I believe that they tried to do that in October or September of 2024, right before the election.
Okay.
Um, yeah. So, this
Why
goes
why
into
why would they wait so long to appeal that?
um, well, that
If
that is
that's something they just had to get done,
right,
why wait till the elect why wait till basically the election?
because politics is a sticky game, Jake.
Is this
Yeah,
a case
I
of
know that. I'm
like
just saying,
they
like,
more pressing things to deal with until they thought it might actually get used? So it's like, why worry about it until, oh, now we have signs that it might actually get used, and then by then it was too late.
Right, exactly. It's like, oh, we don't have to worry like there's this pile of poop that is appearing closer and closer to the fan, but I'm sure the fan won't hit the poop. Like, and
well,
then oh no, the poop's
is
hit the
that
fan.
like what Mississippi? Cole, correct me if I'm wrong, but
Oh.
Mississippi abolishing slavery in 2013
Oh
officially.
geez. That's interesting. I mean, I could see that being the case. Like,
I,
well,
I
let's
could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that's what Cole
well,
has told
we'll
me in the past.
we'll think of it this way, Jake. We're both fraternity brothers, and we were
Hmm.
in Kappa Sigma, and it wasn't until George Floyd died that we rescinded Jefferson Davis's honorary membership for the fraternity. So
That's
sometimes,
crazy. That's a good point.
yeah, you don't do things until they rear their ugly head and present themselves to you, or maybe you have some other motives and other things that you're trying to do to get certain laws and agendas passed. That's totally possible. That's politics. That's the name of the game. But I think that this is just again just a guess. I think Democrats probably saw the writing on the wall that we maybe didn't, that they were going to lose the election, so they tried to pass something to remove it prior to the election occurring. Even though I'm sure that if they would have, the Republicans would have just gone right back and put it into law if they had the
Right.
votes. So and that's the whole thing. It's a game of ping pong, right? It's
Yeah, but
back and
why?
forth, back and forth, back and forth.
But why change the law to re-change it later? Like, don't we want
Well,
this? Don't we want this stuff to just stick forever?
well, I say no. I say no. And the reason I say no is because um, ideally, we are all progressing towards a better future. Um, you know, ideally one where we all have equal freedoms, equal rights, everything like that. And you know, there are
With the same
laws,
opportunity.
right? And that's the thing, is that there are laws, rules, and regulations that are put into place because of societal inequities at a time that eventually can be repealed later on once those societal inequities go away.
Hmm.
So, uh, I'm just I'm throwing out just a random example here. Let's just say, um, we pass a law that makes it okay. Let's put it this way, like gas cars and electric cars, right? So you've got obviously climate change is real. It's a problem that we're all facing, and it's a problem that's going to continue getting worse. That's just a scientific fact. If anyone wants to argue with me, you can argue with scientific papers. Just putting that out there. Um, that's
People do that
been proven.
anyway.
Right. So don't argue with me on that. Argue with the
Argue
scientists
with
and the
Bill
literary
Nye.
papers. Yeah, argue with Bill Nye. I'm sure he'd love to. But
I'm sure
anyways,
he would. Yeah.
yeah. So the what I'm trying to get to here is, let's say we have the climate change crisis that's currently going on. We pass a law that says, it is illegal to own a gas car, right? Kind of, kind of shitty, honestly. It's like, but there's a purpose behind it. We're doing it to try and prevent the climate from getting worse due to the CO2 emissions from gas cars. Okay, so let's say it's 100 years down the line, just like the Alien Enemies Act, right? Maybe it's 200 years down the line, and we've solved the climate crisis. Well, now we can unban gas cars because we've put enough systems in place to make it so that we can remove enough CO2 from the atmosphere that we can actually prevent climate change from accelerating or reverse it in its entirety. So that's the thing, is that we don't necessarily want things to stay put forever. It's just realizing that this is defunct. We shouldn't be doing this anymore. Let's get rid of it. And sometimes you
Yeah,
don't
but like
figure that
that.
out until somebody abuses it.
Yeah, but it wouldn't. That's just a niche case.
It is. It absolutely is. Just, well, this is a very niche act.
No, it is. I
That
agree with you on this, but
yeah.
like
Yeah.
I'm talking about like like major things that happen that we don't want to go back to.
Well, right. Right. And that's the thing, is that um the
Because if it's
world.
gonna be just ping pong and
Mhm.
like regressive versus progressive.
Well, and that's the thing too, and that's kind of my concern with how politicized things have gotten. I mean, there
Hmm.
used to be scenarios where you could reach across the aisle and do things, and there are very small instances where Democrats and Republicans today will get together and agree on certain issues. It's very few and far between.
I think that's how it
Um,
should be, though. They should
oh,
compromise. I think a lot of
I,
the
yep,
compromise.
I
I
agree with
think a
that.
lot of good ideas come from compromisation,
I think
whether it be in politics or your everyday work life.
correct. It's not a one-way street of
Yeah.
it's my way or the highway type deal.
Right. Yeah. I
Um,
think there needs to be there needs to be give and take.
of course, I just think that there there used to be more of a willingness to compromise back in back like I would say post World War II, early civil rights era, like leading into the civil rights movement that we had. There was actually a
I would
lot
say
of
up.
consensus that was developing from that. Eventually, I mean, it took time.
Yeah.
It took time and
Hmm.
a lot of really angry people. Let's be honest.
I'd say you could point to recent presidents where there was compromise.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the biggest thing that I can think of in recent memory is John McCain
Hmm. Yeah, that's who I
preventing the
was thinking of.
affordable yeah, preventing the Affordable Care Act from being struck down, voting against his party, which everyone didn't think he was going to do at the time.
And he
And
lost the
it,
presidency.
yeah, he lost the presidency. I mean, Mitt Romney.
Hmm.
Think of that. The last two people who ran against Democrats outside of Donald Trump support them now and are
Right.
ridiculed. Well, actually, John McCain is obviously passed, but uh, I mean,
They're
think of it that way.
ridiculed.
It's just like
Yeah.
though, yeah, they're ridiculed and they've been completely ousted by their party. So it's very interesting to see how things have changed in the last decade. I mean, think of it that way. We are one decade removed from Donald Trump starting his official campaign run,
Mm.
because it was 2016 and we're in 2025 now, and he probably started his initial bid, at least thinking about it around now in 2015.
Right.
So we're 10 years removed from that initial occurrence, which is kind of crazy to think about how much has changed in 10 years.
Dude, it feels like
So
it flew by 10 years.
it did.
But
Yeah.
also it feels like every day is just
An hour,
the
or it
longest
feels like
day.
every day is like an hour long, but also 10 hours like goes by like so slow.
Yeah, uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, oh, I did find that act, by the way. It was Ilan Omar and Mazie Hirono of Hawaii um, tried to pass a bill called the Neighbors Not Enemies Act, which would
Mm.
repeal the Alien Enemies Act, but never gained traction. Yeah. So let's see. Yeah. So I mean, this is just again kind of a overall look into the checkered past of the Alien Enemies Act, kind of going into how it is a slippery slope that we are exploring utilizing it again today. So I hope that the administration treads carefully with
Mhm.
the power that they try and wield with the act, and I think that it has proven in the past that it has created dark stains on America's history, and that any president, whether that be Democrat or Republican, should think very long and hard about whether or not they want their legacy to be surrounded by an act that has caused a lot of turbulence throughout America in the past. So that's kind of my final thoughts on that. Do you have any final thoughts, Jake?
No.
I think
No,
Zachary wants to talk about something.
Yeah.
I'm just preparing. Don't worry. Go on. Go on. Continue.
It's interesting. I would just say keep looking for this more and more in the news.
Yeah, this is not going to go away anytime soon.
No.
I feel like it might be a little drowned out in the news cycle with everything that's been kind of going on, honestly. But this is very important, especially if you have friends, loved ones who maybe aren't American citizens. They may be on their way to being American citizens, but maybe they're just your friends from different countries who want to be in the United States. It's just concerning that people can be denied due process, and it's just a little concerning. And that's
Yeah.
just something that I feel like we should stray from, honestly. But all
It
right,
just,
well,
to me, it all just seems like a big. They're
there we
like
go.
grasping at straws to get this and put this back into effect.
Yeah,
But
and
who knows?
my
could
my
be wrong.
thing before we wrap up, I think where it's going next is the Supreme Court. And
I think so too. It has to.
yeah, and we will let's just put it out there right now. When this goes to the Supreme Court, I won't even say if, but when this goes to the Supreme Court, we will cover it here, and we will make sure to try and keep you up to date with all of the happenings. When that happens, we'll probably cover other stories in the meantime, obviously. But when that does happen, we will make it a priority to cover this because it does have huge implications on all of us. So, but on a lighter note, I think Zachary got a little excited there and he wants to talk about something. So go ahead and wrap up this episode, Zachary.
So, for those of you who care or don't care, I don't care, that you don't care. I care, but you get it. Tomorrow is opening day for baseball. We're back. We finally have something to either enjoy or suffer with, every day. We're either going to do more suffering or we're going to be happy for 162 games worth, unless you go to the playoffs. Please.
Go Guardians.
Please, Reds. Don't suck.
Boo.
Go Guardians.
No, boo Guardians.
You know what?
Ohio
Guardians,
Cup.
that's fine.
Reds.
Look,
No,
unless the
the
Guardians
Ohio
are
Cup,
playing.
though.
Yeah, unless the Guardians are playing the Reds, that's fine. They're in their own league, in their own division, doing their own thing. When they play the Reds, screw the Guardians. Respectfully, of course.
Respectfully. That's how I feel about the Reds, though.
See?
I want them to win unless they're playing the Guardians.
Should we do an episode from the respective parks?
Oh, that'd be sick.
Yes.
Just do a live, like, imagine taking a handheld camera in there and just recording, like, at our seats while the game goes
While
on.
the
That'd
game's
be
going
hilarious.
on. That would be awesome.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
People would watch
People
it.
would be really
People-
confused.
That would be a good live stream. Yeah,
We'll bring note cards with all our topics and stuff.
Oh, we need to have press passes too to make ourselves look official.
Oh, that'd be sweet, dude. Guardians, if you're listening, make it happen.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, right. Reds, if you're listening.
Please.
All right. Well, yeah. So this has been another episode of the Neutral News. We appreciate you all tuning in. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And just remember, we're two folks who care deeply about making sure people are informed and staying up to date on all of the stuff that's happening in this country. And we get it. It's tough. There's a lot happening. It's information overload 24/7, which is why we hope that, one episode a week listening to us just yap and yammer on is enough for your weekly fill. But, we think this stuff's important. And
yeah, and if it's not enough, we have a catalog.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. yeah, we have a catalog. You feel free to watch our old episodes, see how things have aged, see how things have changed from when you watched it, see how things have developed. And, with that too, you know, we're not sponsored by Ground News, but I think it's a great place to go get, you know, kind of the what's what and what's going on and a, bird's eye view without drowning yourself in information. So, um, yeah, with that, I wish you all a great evening, great rest of the week. Looking forward to hopefully seeing you on Wednesday. And if not, we will make sure to let you know when we will be back online. So